Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we are going to be starting new book Islam and Secularism by Syed Naquib al Attas. And this book is very important to understand the concept of secularism, secularization and secular, and also the concept of deen, and whether these two ideologies could be compatible or not, or whether there could be something like Islamic secularism or Islamic secular or secular Muslim or something like that. And this book would also provide a solution to certain crises that we are seeing in the Muslim world today. So let's start. The book's author is Syed Naquib al Attas, who is contemporary scholar, philosopher, poet, and you can learn more about him if you don't already on the internet. And this book is dedicated to Muslim youth, which is really amazing. So there are 5 chapters in this book, and we are going to be learning one chapter in one video. Inshallah, there are going to be 5 videos on this book, and we will be trying to learn each chapter or the overview of each chapter and the concept presented in those chapters. So in this video, let's start with the first chapter, the contemporary Western Christian background. And as the name suggests, it is not about the concept of secularization, secularism, and secular, but it is about the background of secularization. And we would learn about those concepts in the next chapter and get a deep understanding of those concepts. This is the shortest chapter of the book, so let's start. Crisis of secularization. Neo-modernist thought brought the crisis of secularization, which was realized by the Christian philosophers and theologians of 20th century. Since European Enlightenment and rise of reason and empiricism and scientific and technological advances in the West, philosophers have foreshadowed the crisis. In 19th century, Auguste Comte envisages the rise of science and overthrow of religion. Responses of theologians. Some Christian scholars and theologians began to accept it as an inevitable process and sought alignment and participation in the process of secularization. Some influential theologians, particularly Protestants, seem to accept the fate of traditional Christianity as such and incline towards changing with times. Some went so far as to assert that secularization has its roots in biblical faith. Some European and American theologians call for radical changes in interpretation of gospel. So these are all the responses, but one common thing in all of these is that they call for aligning themselves with the secularizing process, and some even say that it has its roots in biblical faith, which we will talk in more detail in the next chapter. So quoting from page 3 of the book, they went so far as to assert triumphantly in their desire to keep in line with contemporary events in the West that secularization has its roots in biblical faith and is the fruit of the gospel. And therefore, rather than oppose the secularizing process, Christianity must realistically welcome it as a process congenial to its true nature and purpose. Some Christian theologians think that crisis felt by them has not yet taken hold of the community, while others feel that the generality among them, and not just the intellectuals, are already enmeshed in the crisis. The Christians who are opposed to secularization are unconsciously assiduous and complices in the very process. Many Christian theologians and intellectuals are involved in immanent apostasy. Again, quoting from page 4 of the book, indeed, many Christian theologians and intellectuals forming the avant-garde of the church are in fact deeply involved in immanent apostasy, for while firmly resolving to remain Christian at all costs, they openly profess and advocate a secularized version of it, thus pushing into the Christian fold a new emergent Christianity alien to the traditional version to gradually change and supplant it from within. The ever-shifting ground. These scholars know and accept that the ground they prepared for secularized version of Christianity will always be shifting and will be replaced by another one and so on. They think of this contemporary experience of secularization as part of irreversible process of coming of age. They echo the words of Soren Kierkegaard, "We are always becoming Christians." They advocate reconceptualization of the gospel, a redefinition of their concept of God, and a de-Hellenization of Christian dogma. E.L. Maskell said in his book, The Secularization of Christianity, that instead of converting the world to Christianity, they are converting Christianity to the world. Quoting from page 4 and 5 of the book, the theologians and intellectuals referred to above are not only preparing ground for a new secularized version of Christianity, but they also tragically know and accept as a matter of historical fact that the very ground itself will be ever shifting, for they have come to realize by the very relativistic nature of their new interpretation that the new version itself, like all new versions to come, will ultimately again be replaced by another and so on, each giving way to other as future social changes demand. Problem of Hellenization. Before we go further, we should know what is Hellenization. Hellenization is the process of spreading the Greek culture and Greek civilization. But when we are referring to Hellenization in the context of Christianity, we are referring to the different philosophies of the Greek in the Christianity. So let's start. Protestants, particularly Adolf von Harnack, was pressing for the de-Hellenization of Christianity. Catholics are also responding to this call as they see the Hellenization as responsible for conceiving God as a supra-rational person and for the complicated doctrine of Trinity. They press for the demythologization of Christian scripture and de-Hellenization of its dogma, as they see the Hellenization as the main problem for this crisis. Quoting from page 7 of the book, so in a world come of age, they argue controversially, Christian thought cannot any longer be confined to the crib of childish and infantile illusions if it were to be allowed to rise to the real challenge of maturity. Problem of God. Christians realize that their most serious problem is the problem of God. This problem revolves around the Western difficulty in reconciling God's transcendence with his relationship to creation. And as Christianity had assimilated Greek philosophies in their theology, that's why they are having this problem. Parmenides, who was a Greek philosopher, posited that true reality or being is eternal, unchanging, and immovable. God became associated with the unchanging, eternal being far removed from dynamic, interactive nature of existence. And also, Aristotle introduced the concept of God as the unmoved mover, a perfect and eternal being who causes motion in the universe without himself being moved or affected. So it further abstracted God into a philosophical principle rather than a personal deity, which is the concept of real Christianity, which we would also talk about in the next chapter. Doubt about God. William of Ockham doubted the existence of objects. Likewise, the existence of God is also cast in doubt. This trend of philosophy led to the doubt about knowledge. Then after that, René Descartes sought to establish the existence of the self by his famous cogito argument, which is I think, therefore I am. This led to the idea of a priori certainty, the belief that knowledge of God's existence could be known independently of experience through pure reason, and the unknowability of God, of his existence, and of other metaphysical notions of reality and truth was finally established in the West in the 18th century by the German philosopher Immanuel Kant. And augmenting the problem, they think of Christianity as historical, so with time it can become outdated. As historical development demands, Christian theism could be adopted with human evolution. The very name God is becoming problematic for them, and they contemplate to discard it altogether and leave it to history to coin a new name so that they don't have to refer to God for the religion of Christianity. Quoting from page 12 of the book, thus as long as God is conceived of as three of something, it would always allow for future change with the changing world in a relativistic fashion, and this relativism allows the believer to be free to conceive whatever notion of God fancies him most, that is the scriptural or the patristic Hellenic or the medieval scholastic or the modern existential, in such wise that it also allows him or her to align with contemporary experience which is historically minded. And that is end of this chapter. And the next one we are going to be talking about the definitions and the concepts of secularization, secularism. This chapter was shortest chapter of this book, and the next 4 chapters are going to be little bit larger than this chapter.